Thanks, Shane. My name's Christina. I'm an alcoholic. And thanks to AA, I haven't had to take a drink since August 30th, 2003. And my home group is the Monday Night Lake City group. My sponsor for life is at the big meeting in the sky, Sue Campbell. And my current sponsor is Carol H. from my home group. And I'm grateful to be here tonight. Ernie did not want me to be friends with Shane. Um, I but I didn't listen to him. And, he's one of my best friends in AA. We've kind of grown up together because I met him when I wasn't even 30 and at the time. And, that's a lot of years to know somebody and to grow up. But my story is, I had my first drink at 13 and I drank a whole bottle of Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill. And I was the youngest child, like in an alcoholic home. And it was, we used to go to church, everybody was Catholic, but by the time, or, they were baptized and confirmed. But then by the time it got to me, like, I wasn't. And I remember somebody told me once I was going to hell because I wasn't baptized. And I really believed that. I was like, oh man. And I told my mom that once, and she's like, I baptized you in the tub, you're fine. And so, but when I drank that Boone's Farm, I had gone to the Knott's Berry Farm with some friends, and they had like a little dance club there, and we would like smoke cigarettes. I didn't even know how to smoke. I was just like puffing on it. I didn't learn how to inhale till I was like 14, but we drank, we met these older kids and went across the street from the park to the Capri Motel, and they had a bathtub like full of like ice and then these bottles of the Boone's Farm. And I still remember like that night. I still remember where I was sitting. I still remember how it made me feel. And I drank the whole bottle, and then I stood up and I was like, oh, the room is spinning. And it was like, the alcohol was like a place I wanted to stay because my things were confusing for me. Um, I used to see a lot of drinking and fighting, and my mom and dad would always have all these parties, um, and they were, it was like I loved my dad so much, and it was like, but I loved my mom, but I hated her at the same time. And I wanted to be just like her. She was very beautiful. She was like this model TV person in Japan. She's not Japanese, but she grew up there. And, she just was kind of a narcissist. And she and my dad got a divorce, and my dad was in the military, and she took us to Southern California. And then when I was growing up, she had a job, and then she used to drink in the tavern after work. So I, would call up there. I knew her bar by heart and be like, can you come home? I'm hungry. And so I just was ready to get my own place when I was like 10. She got some new couches once, and I'm like, hey, can I have that sofa and put it in my room? And I wanted to like set it up like my apartment. And then my cat was my baby, and I would go to school, but I was like, I'm going to work. I'll be back. You stay in here. But it was like I just wanted to be somewhere else. And so alcohol was perfect for me because I liked how I felt when I drank it. And it turned on me very quickly. I had my first blackout when I was like 14 years old. And I was a major drinker all through high school. My nickname was like Pound Queen. I would drink more beer than everybody. I would like Friday night, it was like I'd have my backpack, I'd have 240 ounces, a pack of cigarettes, and I was like, let's go. And but behind all that, like, this is my persona, and that there was like a lot of pain, but it was like alcohol was just so easy because you feel good and you're happy. And but then like life is happening. And my mom had like a bad husband too. She had all these boyfriends. Like she was doing all kinds of stuff from the time I was, yeah, she always had all these boyfriends, and they were always married. She was always crying, and it was just a lot. But so when I was in high school, we lived on this street with all these kids. It was like all the houses were by each other, and we were all partiers. And I had my boyfriend who I was just so in love with, and we used to drink, and we were going to we used to smoke Camels, and they had the Camel Cash, and we would walk down the street and be like, we're going to get a Camel boat and like have a great life. And everybody at school, like as high school was going on, were like doing stuff. And there were always these nice girls that were like volunteering and like doing all these clubs and stuff. And like I remember being like, those are the bops or the preps. And but like there was a part of me that like wanted to do well too, and was kind of really what that was is I was jealous. But it was like I was so trapped in the alcohol. And I had this thought one New Year's Eve that I would like, my mom had like all these coworkers and I would babysit for them. And I babysat for one of her coworkers for many years, this beautiful lady from England. And she was not working in the office anymore and she was going to school to be a nurse. And so I was babysitting while she was like doing her clinicals. And I still remember her. Her name was Frances, and she smelled like opium perfume, and she was really beautiful. And she had an older daughter from her first marriage who had joined the Air Force and was also a nurse. And so I just really looked up to them. And I had another friend's mom who I also really liked, and she was a nurse. And I was like, you know what? I should join the Air Force and go be a nurse and like stop all this drinking and start a new life. And the people come to the school and like make you do this testing, the ASVAB testing. So I remember in my senior year, I did the test and they're like, hey, you did really well on the test. Like you should talk to the recruiters. And so I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to join the Air Force and like, this is my ticket out. Cause like I hadn't applied to any colleges or anything. And I was like, that was what I was going to do. And then as graduation came, I ended up like not being able to graduate by like 1 point because I never went to school. I wrote my own notes from the time I was in like ninth grade. Please excuse Christina Perez due to illness. And I just signed my mom's signature on everything. And, you know, that last year of my high school was kind of a dark place because my mom and her husband had broke up and she would always go stay at his apartment. I was writing my own notes. I had my own car and I was like in this dark place of like, no one's watching me. And I'm just like imploding here with this. And I really didn't want to do it, but it was like all I knew. So that was kind of my way out. And I never ended up like going because you had to like not use marijuana and I couldn't do that. So I just got a fake ID. I moved out and I got an apartment and started going to a little tavern just like my mom across the freeway overpass in San Clemente, California. And I remember I had an older neighbor that used to drink a lot and she would buy us booze when we weren't at the bar with our fake IDs. Her name was Robin and she worked at like Albertsons in the deli. And we would get up the next day and then like her car would be there and she hadn't gone to work. And I'm like, she didn't go to work. Like, you know, but she was just a little bit older. I wasn't there yet. I had just started like working. And I ended up like getting back together with my boyfriend from high school that I used to drink and party with. And I got another apartment. I moved out from a place in San Clemente and I was like, we're going to grow up. We're going to like stop this, you know. And I had this period of time where I didn't drink. I wasn't really drinking like that, but my husband liked my family because my mom and my brothers drank a lot. And so it was this whole drinking thing. But I just remember coming home from work all the time and just like crying and be like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, what's wrong with me? And I wasn't like, alcohol wasn't taking it away anymore. And then we got married, and my mom told me like not to get married to him because he would leave me because of like it was just chaos. And at my wedding, my mom was so drunk that it was just like her bloodshot eyes. It was so embarrassed. I was humiliated, and I wasn't drunk. Everybody else was. And so after we got married, I was like, we're gonna go to college, like you first, and then me. And so my husband started going to night school, and I innocently like went to my mom's bar once with a friend. We were like, let's go for a walk. And then we went to the bar and it was karaoke night and we started like drinking and I got that same feeling from alcohol that I did that first night. And I was like, oh, this is like where I need to be. I just need to stay here like in this like that perpetual buzzed feeling. But it was the same thing. It's like it turned on me so fast and I started like staying out later. At first, it started on Tuesdays and Thursdays when my husband went to night school. And, you know, drinking was our whole life. Like he was a boring drunk though. He was like in the house, you know, just drinking all these beers where I was in the bar, like, you know, starting fights and like just that chaos drinking. And yeah, he did not like when I drank that way. But and you know, it turned fast. And I would wake up every day and like just throw up, then, drink a Dr. Pepper, go to work. And then I'd be like, I'm not going to drink tonight. And like by 4 o'clock, I'd be like, I can go get a couple. And I drink at this little tavern. And just like my mom, I was like in the same place. And I ended up like leaving my husband for a little while, saying I needed to find myself, and like was out finding myself doing lots of other street things, drugs basically. And my husband got offered a job here in Seattle, and he was like, I'm leaving. I'm not, that's it. I'm not putting up with your stuff anymore. And at the last minute, I was like, okay, I want to go, because I was scared. I'm like, he kind of like protected me during that period. I stopped working by that time. And he said the only way you can go is like if you go to treatment. And my mom and I like found this place called Sundown M Ranch. And I was like, oh, it's a ranch. So like, I'm gonna ride horses and go swimming and like get rehabilitated. And that's not what happened. But so we drove up here, and all my mom's like siblings, there's like 8 kids in her family. They all live here, all my aunts and uncles. And my grandpa was from Marysville. I used to come up here. My mom would send me up here in the summer so she could go out and drink, and I would stay with all my aunts and uncles. So when you came up here, I went to Sundown, and they were like, the intake thing. They're like, you're a late stage alcoholic. No way. Like, but I had a feeling of relief, because I was like, this is what's wrong with me. And I was 24 years old, and I was in there for only a couple days. And then they took me to the hospital because I had all this, something was wrong with my stomach and I was really sick. And the hospital said I had pancreatitis, the worst levels that pancreatic amylase they'd ever seen in that ER. And I was in there for a couple days and like cussing out the chaplain, because they brought the chaplain in there. I was like, does this mean I'm like dying or what's happening? Like, but I got really angry because I was scared. And I was in there for a couple days, and they said I needed surgery, and they brought me out and took me back to the treatment center. And in the treatment center, they have you like go through the steps of this book of virtues kind of, and like you write on them. And so it's almost like a 4-step, but it's not, it's their treatment version. So I wrote all these horrible things, and then I kept getting sick. They had to keep taking me to the ER. They're like, don't eat cheese. And I'm like, but we're having pizza. Like, I hadn't been eating for like 2 years. So I was really like happy to eat when I was there. And the chaplain, so they're like, you're going to have to read the 4-step to the chaplain, or, do your 5th step with this chaplain. So I'm reading him all the stuff that I wrote down, and he starts crying. And it scared the heck out of me, because I was like, whoa, I really am bad. Like, this is like a man of the Lord. He's hearing my stuff and he's crying. So it scared me to do that again, or to tell somebody all that stuff. But I think looking back on it, it's like he just had compassion for me, but it's like I saw it as like, oh my God, I'm so bad. So when I got out of there, I got back to Seattle and ended up in the hospital a couple days later. And I was in the Swedish Ballard ER, and I was in so much pain with my stomach. And I just remember thinking like, they were wheeling me back to a CT scan, and I thought like, I'm dying. I'm never going to get up off this table and walk. I'm never going to be sober. I'll never be a nurse. Like, I'll never do anything with my life. Like, I was just like, it's over. And then I had the surgery. I was in the hospital for like 9 days. They finally, like, the one of what was stuck in my duct or something passed, and then they were able to do the surgery. And I got out, and I was scared because I was only 24, and I'm like, I was hospitalized like because of all my drinking and drugging. And so I stayed like scared sober for like 9 months or something, but my husband was still drinking. And I would just like go to these meetings like the Ed Lynn, and I would just be like, I'm not really like these people. And all I could say for my story was like how I'd had this surgery and like what happened to me. And like, that was my whole story, but I wasn't doing anything. And he was still drinking every night. So I convinced him one night when we went bowling with my cousins that I could still safely drink. I just wouldn't do all the other things. And that first night I drank like 18 Bud Lights at the Linwood bowling alley. And it was like the same thing. And a couple weeks later, they put me back into another treatment center. And when I was in there, I was really angry. I was like, I'm not doing this. And my whole family was coming in. They're like, we're taking her to AA. And I'm like, no, you're not. I'm getting a divorce. Got out of there, and it immediately started drinking. My aunt and uncle went to Hawaii. I went to their house, and there was a whole one of those, glass water bottles, like full of all this change. I just kept like dumping it out and taking it to the Coinstar, and like cashing it in. Well, then they came home and they're like, what the hell? And so so I went over to my other aunt's house, and they showed up with like my car with all my clothes in it and like the empty bottle. And my husband, like, he was just done. That was the third treatment in 1 year. And he had gone to like HR at his work. And he was like a really successful guy. He had a lot of money, which I think he enabled me. But he went into the HR and was like, hey, I really need help. My wife's an alcoholic, and like, I need some counseling. And the woman that was working in there was like, well, why don't we go out? And then they ended up getting together and they're still married. And so those guys got together, but it was a blessing because when they showed up with all my stuff that night, he was like, immediately called him and he's like, I'm not coming to get you. And my family's like, you're going to jail or you're going to treatment. And they took me to Lakeside that night. And I was in there and in a lot of trouble, and woke up the next day and was crying in the huge auditorium. There was a big, what's that, like that, like a room like this full of people. And I was just like, what am I going to do? Like, nobody wants me drinking. And now I'm like almost destitute because he left me. And I was just feeling really sorry for myself, even though I was the one that had put myself in that place. And a guy one of the people that worked there walked past me and saw me crying. And he was like, hey, like, everything's going to be okay, I promise. And a couple nights later, they were like, okay, you're going to outside meeting. And someone picked me up, and a woman named Amber, well, her name was Amy back then, she changed it. She picked me up, and she was a young person. And we went to the Monday Night Lake City group. And the guy that had said, hey, everything's going to be okay, he was in that meeting. And I'm like, hey, that's that guy that told me I was going to be okay. And then there was this other guy who came in late and went straight to the back and sat on the piano bench. And then they asked him to share last. And he said one of the things that I identified the most. He said, well, first he's like, my name's Ernie M. And he said, when I got here, you asked me what time it is, and I'll tell you how to make a watch. And then he said, when I got to AA, I wanted to drink so bad, my hair wanted to drink. And I was like, that is how I feel. And I liked that group. Like, I had been to a lot of AA meetings, and it was just like trendy and like these cool people. And that's how I felt like it was, because I was a young person and just wanted to fit in. But this was like a safe place because, no one was ever really parenting me. I raised myself, and this was a safe place. And so I started going there. And Amy, the young person, she sponsored me, and I stayed over 9 months. And then my husband told me he was getting divorced and the other lady was pregnant. And I just was like, what's the point? Because like, I still was like, I want to go back home. I want my husband back. I want, a house, a Chevy Tahoe, 3 baby girls. Like, I had all these conditions and it wasn't going to happen. So I ended up drinking again. And the last 4 months that I drank, it was from the night before I turned 26. So April 10th of 2003 till August 29th was my last drink. And those last 4 months, have been to AA and have a home group, and then going out and drinking after, it was terror, it was anguish, it was despair, it was sorrow, I couldn't predict what I was going to do. And, alcohol beat me into a place where my back was totally against the wall. And my last drunk was on a Friday night, but I had been going to Lake City because if I didn't show up, Marv, that guy that said it was going to be okay, would call me and be like, are you coming to the meeting? And so, and they knew I was drinking, but they still invited me back. And when I went out I went to the meeting on a Monday night, and I was like, I got to get a new sponsor. I don't identify with my other sponsor. She was, it was me, but she would say stuff like, I'm here because God chose me. And I'm like, why are you so special? What about the rest of us? And she was just trying to help me, and she was in her own journey, but I didn't see that at the time. I was just, so there was a nice blonde lady at the front that was the secretary. And that Monday night, I went up to her and was like, hey, can you be my sponsor? And she's like, I only have 3 years sober. Like, I've never sponsored anybody. And I'm like, well, it's time you start. And she said, can you call me every night with he knows my story, so he's heard this 1,000 times. So she said, can you call me every night and tell me 5 things you're powerless over and 5 things you're grateful for? And I was like, the first honest thing, I'm like, I don't think I can because I'm drunk at night. But she said, we'll try. And I called Monday, I called that night, and then I called through Thursday. And then Friday, I was like, hey, I'll go to an early meeting and call her, and then I'll go out and drink. I don't know why I did that. Because nobody cared like what I was doing at that point. And I went to this women's meeting in Shoreline, and I said, like, I have 4 days. And this lady, Sharon, was like, I can tell you look like crap. And so she was my friend too, she was doing me a favor, but she chased me out to the parking lot after the meeting and gave me a speaker tape. And I listened to that speaker tape the next morning in my apartment. And it's like that. I was done. Like what she said on that tape, she said, like, if you're really as bad as you think you are, you wouldn't care. But the fact that you care and you care so much means you are not those things that you do when you're drinking. But like you have to find new management because your life is completely, you're powerless. And like there's implied action in that second half, like, and she said, you need new management and it's not you, and it's got to come from a higher power. Well, what is that, And she broke it down to something as simple as when you go to bed at night, you don't make a decision to breathe. You put your head on the pillow, your lungs pump air up and down all night. You wake up the next morning, you feel that breath on the back of your tongue. That's a power greater than you because you don't get to decide when you're here and when you're not. And that means that like God loves you like you're his only child. And before that stuff would make me cringe. And all the things I heard in the meeting, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, I realized that morning, I am like this because of me. Like every time I take a drink, this is what happens to me. And I'm like, I have to do what those people in AA are doing. Call before you drink. I've got to like do this. And I said the same prayer she said on the tape. I'm like, God, it's Donna E. who said that. I was like, God, I don't know who you are or what you want from me, but if you want anything to do with the rest of my life, please help me now. And I haven't had a drink since. But after that, it was like all the stuff they told me to do at Lake City, I did it. Call before you drink. I'd call. I still have all Ernie's phone numbers in my phone. There's like 5. I would call all of them. I would call Marv, the guy from the treatment center. I would call Sue. Sue, my sponsor, and I had this thing. It was like call and hang up, call and hang up. I called her every night for the first 3.5 years, leaving her my list of I'm powerless, I'm grateful. And that first like few months, it was so hard. I could not be alone. So I went to 2 meetings a night. Then I went out to coffee with people I didn't even like. I had this crappy little job as a nurse's assistant. My apartment sucked. I had fleas. I didn't even have any pets. Like it was awful. It was awful. And Sue, like, I couldn't sleep at night. And she told me one day, she's like, okay, this is not AA approved, but just come get this book off my doorstep and read this. And it was a Nora Roberts book about this girl that was in Ireland. And in the first like couple chapters, they went to the Cliffs of Moher. And I'll never forget it. And the book like kept me okay. And then she's like, okay, you finished that one, come get the second one. And then it was a trilogy about these 3 sisters in Ireland. And so many years went by, and I had lots of years with Ernie at that home group. We used to answer phones here. Ernie would say, we answer phones on the 3rd Thursday of every month from 6 to 10 p.m. at 5507 6th Avenue South in Lucille. You can come on a volunteer basis. The answering service is really important because it's a lot of people's first contact with Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I can still hear that in my head. And, Sue, like basically Sue, Marv, and Ernie like raised me. And Ernie took me to Fremont when I had 2 years sober to like get into service and meet Carrie and start going into the King County Jail. And so I found all these old timers there. It was like the Mecca, the Saturday noon meeting. It was just like you would go in that room, you're like, oh my God, these people are so amazing. Like it was just such a special time. And then I started being like, hey, this Fremont is fun. But like Ernie told me I wasn't allowed to go up there at the 5 o'clock, but I did. And because Bob Ness told me, he's like, Ernie's not here at the 5 o'clock. You can come up here. So I went up there, and that was where I met Shane. And then Shane and I just started walking around Green Lake, and I was nuts. I was nuts when I got here, and drama and chaos. And Shane and I just hit it off. And Ernie told me, he's like, you don't be friends with him. He's waiting his turn with you. And 20 years later, like we have been like family. And you know I moved out of the area and then moved back, but Sue was always like my sponsor, and she raised me. Ernie and them told me, you got to go to college, and then I went to college and I became a nurse. And then I started working at the same hospital that I was like on the gurney at and having the surgery all those years later. I worked there for 13 years. I was the charge nurse up on the 5th floor. And if that's not like a higher power, I don't know what is. And, Sue, she got lung cancer, and it was such a hard thing to lose her because she was like my foundation. There was like 3 things that have happened to me in my sobriety that have been like the lowest pain. When Ernie died, when Sue died, and when Shane drank again, those were like my hardest times in my sobriety. And it was such a blessing though, because I got to go to her house and take care of her that last week because I was a nurse. Her family was like scared as hell. And so we were at their house just taking care of her all week long that last week. And I didn't even realize how much she loved me until that last week. And I just got back. I went on a tour to Ireland as a tribute to Sue. And the first place we went on the tour was the Cliffs of Moher. It was such a meaningful trip. It was out of this world. And then our tour guide, he says, yeah, I highly recommend a Rick Steves tour, but he said, he was telling us some story, and then he's like, I used to drink a lot, and then I had to join our other family. And I'm like, hey, are you in AA? And he's like, yeah. So then he told me where to get to a meeting in Dublin. But, that's just kind of how God works in my life. So many amazing things have happened to me. During COVID, I worked at that hospital for so many years, and I had a spiritual experience after I watched the show on Hulu called Dope Sick. And there was a doctor in there, he got addicted, and they sent him to AA, and they sent him to AA, but he was an opiate addict. And he said, no, we have to find a new way to help these people. We can't help them like we help an alcoholic. And I had already kind of worked in the addiction medicine field, and I was going to school to be a nurse educator because I was like, I'll work bedside till I die. I'm in the union, it's great. And then I'll teach on the side. And I saw that show, and a colleague of mine who's a dear friend was like, you really don't need to like do that education thing. Just become a nurse practitioner. You can still do education. And I switched my program after I watched that. And now I've been working as a nurse practitioner in addiction medicine. And, everything I have today is because of AA. Like, I've grown up here. I've spent most of my adult life here. And there was so many people that helped me. And so it's like my responsibility to be here and to keep doing it. And Shane's like, when he was like, I'm going back out, we got in service in I got tricked into it, but he was going to the district meeting. And so when I lived up north for a period of time. And so District 12 was the district we were in. So I went up to the district meeting one night just to like hang out. I'm like, come on, let's get out of here. And then they're like, you're the new treasurer. Like, I don't know if I got voted in that night, but we had a blast. We did like 2 rotations of GSR, and like, that was like the funnest time we had. I mean, we met so many people, and it's like wherever you go, it's like that. And we went to the international, and like, it was just, I am so grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous because it's like, what would I have done if I didn't find this? And like all these people that gave me their time, like, yeah, I'm just very grateful to be. And then this lady at Fremont used to say, Terry, she would say, I'm grateful to be sober, in my right mind, and fully clothed. And, I used to love that. And that's kind of my experience. And, it's like everything happens in time and on time. I'm having a bad day, and it's like, I'll go into a meeting. I'm like, whoa, this person like said this right thing. One time I was going to drink, and I called Ernie one hot summer day. I had like 2 years. I'm like, I'm going to drink. And he was at a family wedding. He's like, meet me at Serenity Hall. Like, I'll meet you there after the wedding. And I'm like, I don't know how to get there. I was driving around, and I saw a police car. I could not find it. And I rolled down my window, and I was like, I'm an alcoholic, and if I don't get to Serenity Hall, I'm about to drink. And then the policeman goes, I know where it is. I'll take you. And he turned on the lights, and he drove up the hill, and police escorted me to the meeting. And then Ernie met me there, and I stayed sober. And then we went to EDI, and we like went to 3 meetings that day, and it was amazing. And I'll never forget that day. And so, yeah, it's nice to be here and to see everybody. And thank you for another day.